The young street vendor was invited to a ball at a luxury mansion where she caught the eye of a billionaire businessman. They started a romance, but she soon discovered he was promised to another woman. The aroma of freshly popped popcorn filled the air of New York's bustling Times Square. Hazel Mason, 23, set up her popcorn cart, preparing for another day's work. Her green eyes scanned the crowd, looking for potential customers among the tourists and hurried New Yorkers. Hazel wasn't just another street vendor, an art graduate. She dreamed of one day exhibiting her paintings in renowned galleries. For the time being, the popcorn cart was her only source of income, allowing her to pay the rent on her tiny apartment in the Bronx and buy materials for her true passion. "Hot popcorn! Best popcorn in New York!" she shouted, her melodious voice standing out against the hubbub of the square. A tall, well-dressed man stopped abruptly in front of her cart, almost knocking over his phone as he tried to balance a stack of folders. Hazel watched him, fascinated by the contrast between his impeccable appearance and his expression of pure panic. "Oh, for God's sake," he muttered, trying to catch the cell phone that was slipping out of his hand. Without a second thought, Hazel leaned over the trolley and grabbed the device before it hit the ground. "Got it!" she exclaimed, a triumphant smile lighting up her freckled face. The man looked at her, surprised and relieved. "You saved my life," he said, his voice low and smooth, "or at least my job." Hazel laughed, handing him the phone. "Happy to help. Sounds like you're having quite a day." "You have no idea," he sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "I'm Liam Callahan." "Hazel Mason," she introduced herself, extending her hand over the trolley. "Nice to meet you, Liam. Would you like some popcorn to brighten your day?" Liam hesitated for a moment, looking at his expensive wristwatch. "You know what? Why not?" He smiled, his blue eyes shining with sudden resolve. "I think I deserve a break." As Hazel prepared a bag of popcorn, Liam leaned his briefcases on the trolley, seeming to relax for the first time since he'd arrived. "So, Hazel, have you always worked with popcorn?" She laughed, handing him the steaming bag. "Actually, I'm an artist, or at least I try to be. This is just my livelihood for now." Liam arched an eyebrow, interested. "Artist? What kind of art?" "Painting, mostly," Hazel replied, a blush creeping up her cheeks. She wasn't used to talking about her passion with strangers, especially handsome men in expensive suits. "Fascinating," Liam murmured, sipping his popcorn. His eyes widened in surprise. "Wow, that's really good." Hazel smiled proudly. "Secret family recipe. My grandmother taught me." They talked for a few minutes, Liam asking questions about his art and Hazel answering with growing enthusiasm. He was easy to talk to, despite their clearly different backgrounds. Suddenly, Liam's phone rang, making him jump. "Damn," he muttered, looking at the screen. "I've got to go. It was nice to meet you, Hazel." He started to walk away, but stopped and turned around. "Hey, are you going to be here tomorrow?" Hazel nodded in surprise. "Yeah, every day except Sunday." Liam smiled. "Great. See you tomorrow then." As he disappeared into the crowd, Hazel wondered if he would really come back. Men like Liam Callahan didn't usually frequent popcorn stands in Times Square. But, to her surprise, Liam turned up the next day, and the next, and the next. His visits became the highlight of Hazel's day. They chatted about art, music, books, everything except Liam's mysterious job that always left him running around. 2 weeks after their first meeting, Liam arrived with an envelope in his hand and a nervous smile on his face. "Hazel," he began, his voice trembling slightly. Well, there's something I want to ask you." Hazel's heart raced. She had dreamed of this moment, but never believed it would actually happen. Liam held out the envelope. "There's a charity ball next week, at the Rosewood Mansion in Hampton. It's a very exclusive event and, well, I'd like you to go with me." Hazel was stunned, picking up the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was an elegant invitation to the annual Rosewood Charity Ball. "Liam, I don't know what to say," she stammered. "I don't have anything to wear to an event like this, and—" "Don't worry about it," Liam interrupted her gently. "I'll take care of everything. I just want you to be there, with me." Hazel looked into Liam's eyes, seeing the sincerity and something else, something that made her heart skip a beat. She knew she should refuse. That different worlds like theirs rarely mixed without consequences. But at that moment, looking at Liam's hopeful smile, she couldn't find the strength to say no. "Yes," she whispered. "I'd love to go." Liam's face lit up with a radiant smile. He took Hazel's hand and kissed it softly, sending shivers throughout her body. "You won't regret it," he promised. As Liam pulled away, Hazel looked at the invitation in his hand, a mixture of excitement and apprehension bubbling in her chest. She had no idea what awaited her at this ball, but something told her that her life was about to change forever. The rest of the day passed in a blur for Hazel. She served customers mechanically, her mind wandering to the ball and to Liam. When she finally closed the trolley and began her journey home, the reality of what she had agreed began to set in. In her small apartment, Hazel stood in front of the mirror, examining her reflection critically. Her red hair was tied up in a messy bun, and paint stains dotted her worn jeans. How could she fit into Liam's glamorous world? But then she remembered the way he looked at her, as if she were the only person in the world. With a determined sigh, Hazel squared her shoulders. She might not belong in Liam's world, but for one night, she would live a fairy tale. Little did Hazel know that this fairy tale would have twists and turns that she could never have imagined. The week leading up to the prom passed in a whirlwind for Hazel. Between her shifts at the popcorn cart and her late-night painting sessions, she barely had time to process the magnitude of the event she was about to attend. The day before the ball, a delivery arrived at her apartment, a huge box with a delicate bow. Inside, Hazel found the most stunning dress she had ever seen. It was an emerald green ball gown with a bodice embroidered with tiny beads that twinkled like stars. Along with the dress, there was a pair of silver high-heeled shoes and a small matching handbag. Hazel touched the soft fabric, tears forming in her eyes. A small note accompanied the gift. "To the most beautiful star in New York. I can't wait to see her shine. Liam." On the day of the ball, Hazel felt like Cinderella getting ready for the royal ball. She spent hours getting ready, transforming her red hair into soft waves and applying light makeup that highlighted her green eyes. When the doorbell rang, Hazel felt her heart race. She opened the door to find Liam standing there, elegant in a black tuxedo, his blue eyes shining with admiration. "Hazel," he whispered, "you look stunning." She blushed, feeling more beautiful than she had ever felt. "You don't look bad yourself," she joked, trying to hide her nervousness. Liam offered his arm and led her to a black limousine waiting on the street. As they drove to the Hamptons, Hazel couldn't help noticing how tense Liam seemed, his fingers drumming restlessly on his knee. "Is everything all right?" she asked softly. Liam forced a smile. "Sure, just a bit nervous about the speech I have to give. You know, corporate politics." Hazel nodded, although she didn't really know. Liam's world was still a mystery to her. When they arrived at the Rosewood mansion, Hazel was breathless. The place was magnificent, with its imposing architecture and meticulously tended gardens. Dozens of luxury cars were parked in the circular driveway, and elegantly dressed guests walked up the marble steps. Liam guided her inside, his hand firmly on the small of her back. The ballroom was breathtaking, with crystal chandeliers, exotic flowers and an orchestra playing softly in one corner. "Liam, darling," a shrill voice cut through the air. An elegant middle-aged woman approached, her eyes scanning Hazel quickly before settling on Liam. "We were wondering when you'd arrive." "Mrs. Huntington," Liam greeted politely. "This is Hazel Mason." "Hazel, this is Evelyn Huntington, the event organizer." Evelyn gave Hazel a cold smile. "Delighted, I'm sure. Liam, your father's looking for you. Anything about the opening speech?" Liam tensed. "Of course, Hazel, do you mind if I—" "Go ahead," Hazel smiled encouragingly. "I'll be fine." As soon as Liam walked away, Evelyn turned to Hazel, her smile disappearing. "So, Miss Mason, what family are you from?" Hazel swallowed. "Actually, I'm not from any important family. I'm an artist." Evelyn arched a perfectly drawn eyebrow. "Really? And how exactly did you meet Liam?" Before Hazel could answer, A new voice joined the conversation. "Ah, there you are, darling." A stunning young woman with platinum blonde hair approached, wrapping her arm around Evelyn's. She smiled at Hazel, but she didn't know what to make of it. She smiled at Hazel, but her eyes were as cold as ice. "You must be Liam's date," she said, her voice sweet as honey but with a steely edge. "I'm Amber Huntington, Liam's fiancée." Hazel's world seemed to stop. Engaged. Liam was engaged. I didn't know," Hazel stammered, feeling the blood drain from her face. Amber laughed, a cruel, musical sound. "Oh dear, don't tell me Liam didn't mention it. Well, I suppose he likes to keep his amusements separate from his real life." Hazel felt as if she'd been punched in the stomach. She looked around frantically, looking for Liam, but he was on the other side of the hall, surrounded by businessmen. "If you'll excuse me," Hazel muttered, walking away quickly. She needed air. She needed to think. She found a quiet balcony and leaned on the parapet, breathing deeply. How could she have been so naive? Of course, a man like Liam would already be engaged. She was just a distraction, a game for him. "Hazel!" Liam's voice sounded behind her, worried and confused. She turned around, tears glistening in her eyes. "Are you engaged?" Liam paled. "I can explain." "Explain what?" Hazel interrupted, her voice trembling. "That you used me, that I'm just a diversion before you get married." "No," Liam protested, taking a step towards her. "It's nothing like that. The engagement, it's arranged. I don't love Amber." Hazel shook her head in disbelief. "And that makes it okay. You should have told me, Liam. I thought we had something special." "We do," Liam insisted, taking her hands. "Hazel, I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. You're unlike anyone I've ever met. You make me want to be better, to be more than just the Callahan heir." Hazel pulled her hands away, her broken heart fighting the urge to believe him. "I have to go," she whispered. "Please don't go," Liam begged. "We can talk about this. I can fix things." At that moment, Evelyn Huntington's voice echoed through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our host for the evening, Mr. Gerald Callahan, and his son, the future CEO of Callahan Industries, Liam Callahan." Hazel saw the conflict in Liam's eyes. He looked at her, then at the hall door, clearly divided. "Go," Hazel said softly. "Your world is calling." With one last tormented look, Liam turned and walked back into the hall. Hazel watched him walk away, feeling as if a chasm had opened up between them. She didn't wait to hear the speech. Instead, she sneaked down the back stairs and out into the gardens. Tears ran freely down her face as she walked along the lantern-lit paths. How could she have been so foolish to believe that a fairy tale could be real? Hazel laughed bitterly at her own naivety. She didn't belong in this world of wealth and power. It was time to return to reality. But as she hailed a cab to take her back to New York, Hazel couldn't help looking back at the brightly lit mansion. For a brief moment, she had tasted a different world, had felt something she thought was true love. Now, all that remained were the shards of a broken dream and the harsh truth that sometimes fairy tales don't have happy endings. The rising sun was painting the New York skyline in shades of pink and orange when Hazel's cab finally arrived at her modest apartment in the Bronx. Exhausted physically and emotionally, she staggered inside, still wearing her stunning emerald green dress, now crumpled and stained with tears. Hazel let herself fall onto the bed, her body shaking with silent sobs. Amber's words echoed in her mind. "Fun. Separate from your real life." Was that what she was to Liam? A mere hobby? The hours passed, and Hazel remained motionless, lost in thought and regret. The shrill ring of her phone snapped her out of her stupor. It was Zoe, her best friend and fellow artist. "Liv, where are you? I thought we were meeting for breakfast." Hazel closed her eyes, suddenly remembering her appointment. "Zoe, I can't make it today. I'm sorry." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What happened?" Zoe's voice was full of concern. "I was an idiot," Hazel whispered, the tears threatening to fall again. Half an hour later, Zoe was at Hazel's apartment, armed with coffee, donuts, and a willingness to listen. Hazel poured out the whole story, the meeting with Liam, the weeks of secret meetings, the dance and the painful revelation. "Oh, Liv," Zoe sighed, hugging her friend. "I'm so sorry. That asshole." Hazel shook her head. "No, it's my fault. I should have known it was too good to be true. A billionaire falling in love with a popcorn vendor. What a cliché." Zoe held Hazel's shoulders, looking her in the eye. "Listen, Hazel Mason, you're amazing. Talented, beautiful, kind. If Liam can't see that, that's his problem. You deserve someone who appreciates you for who you are." Zoe's words ignited a small spark of determination in Hazel. She stood up, walking over to her abandoned easel in the corner of the apartment. "You're right," she said, picking up a paintbrush. "No more fairy tales. It's time to get back to reality." In the days that followed, Hazel immersed herself in her art like never before. Her paintings, once full of vibrant colors and cheerful scenes, now explored darker themes, broken hearts, shattered dreams, the harsh reality behind the glossy facades. She avoided Times Square, unable to bear the thought of meeting Liam again. Instead, she found a new spot for her popcorn cart, near an art gallery in Soho. A week after the dance, Hazel was packing up her cart when a familiar voice called out to her. "Liv?" She turned to see Liam standing there, looking tired and disheveled, so different from his usual impeccable appearance. "What do you want, Liam?" Hazel asked, her voice cold. "To talk," he replied, taking a hesitant step towards her. "Explain, please, Hazel, give me a chance." Hazel felt her heart squeeze. A part of her wanted to listen, wanted to believe that there was an explanation that could fix everything. But the rational part of her mind prevailed. "There's nothing to explain," she said firmly. "You're engaged. End of story." "It's not that simple," Liam insisted. "Engagement. It's complicated. Family issues, expectations." Hazel held up a hand, interrupting him. "Liam, stop. Maybe for you, commitments are flexible. But for me, they're not. You made your choice when you decided not to tell me about Amber." Liam seemed to wilt at her words. "I never meant to hurt you, Hazel. You have to believe that." "But you did," she replied softly. "And now I have to move on." Just then, Liam's cell phone rang. He looked at the screen and grimaced. "It's my dad. I need to go." Hazel finished for him, a sad smile on her lips. "You always do." Liam hesitated, clearly torn. Finally, with a defeated sigh, he turned to answer the call, taking a few steps away. Hazel watched him, a mixture of emotions swirling in her chest. Anger, hurt, and yet, despite everything, a touch of longing. But there was something else now, a growing determination. She would not be defined by this episode. She wouldn't let the pain consume her or stop her from pursuing her dreams. With one last look at Liam, who was gesturing animatedly on the phone, Hazel made a decision. Picking up her drawing pad, she began to sketch furiously. The lines flowed from her pencil, capturing the scene before her. A man torn between two worlds, trapped in the bonds of expectations and obligations. When Liam finally hung up and turned around, Hazel had already put the drawing away and was serving a customer. "Hazel, Goodbye, Liam," she interrupted him gently. "I hope you find what you're looking for." He stood there for a moment, as if he wanted to say something more, but finally he just nodded and walked away, disappearing into the New York crowd. Hazel watched him go, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. She knew the pain wouldn't disappear overnight, but for the first time since the ball she felt hope. That evening, back in her apartment, Hazel picked up the sketch she had made of Liam. With bold brush strokes and vivid colors, she transformed the drawing into a powerful painting, a portrait not just of Liam, but of all those caught between duty and desire, between what they are and what they want to be. When she had finished, Hazel took a step back, looking critically at her work. It was unlike anything she had ever created before, more mature, deeper, charged with emotion and complexity. With a determined smile, she picked up her phone and dialed a number. "Hello, Mr. Donovan, this is Hazel Mason. Remember that exhibition we discussed? I think I have something you'll want to see." While making an appointment with the gallery owner, Hazel felt a wave of excitement run through her body. She had gone into this experience expecting a fairy tale, but came out with something much more valuable: inspiration, growth, and a new direction for her art. The sun set over New York, painting the sky with the same vibrant colors that now danced across Hazel's canvas. One chapter of her life had ended, but another, full of possibilities, was just beginning. Autumn arrived in New York, bringing with it a cool breeze and the promise of change. For Hazel Mason, that change came in the form of a long-awaited opportunity. The art gallery in Soho, where she used to park her popcorn cart, was packed with elegantly dressed people, all there to see the new exhibition entitled Portraits of the Soul. In the center of the main wall, the centerpiece stood out, the portrait of Liam that Hazel had painted that fateful night. "It's simply extraordinary, Miss Mason," praised Mr. Donovan, the gallery owner, as he approached Hazel. "You've captured a depth of emotion that is, well, it's breathtaking." Hazel smiled, a mixture of pride and nervousness coursing through her body. "Thank you, Mr. Donovan. It means a lot to hear that from you." "Oh, and it looks like we have a buyer interested in this piece," he whispered, leaning closer. "A very generous price, I might add." Hazel's heart leapt. Selling her first work at an exhibition was more than she had dared dream of. She watched the crowd, wondering who the mysterious buyer might be. It was then that she saw him, Liam Callahan, standing in front of his own portrait, an indecipherable expression on his face. He was impeccably dressed as always, but there was something different about his posture, a tension, a vulnerability that Hazel had never noticed before. Before she could decide whether to approach him or not, Zoe appeared at her side, practically bouncing with excitement. "Liv, this is incredible! Did you see who's here? The editor-in-chief of Art Today, and I hear there's a curator from MoMA running around." Hazel smiled at her friend's enthusiasm, but her eyes kept returning to Liam. He still hadn't seen her, completely absorbed in the painting. "Zoe," Hazel said softly, "can you give me a minute? There's something I need to do." Zoe followed Hazel's gaze and nodded understandingly. "Of course, darling. I'll be near the wine if you need me." With a deep sigh to calm herself, Hazel walked towards Liam. He noticed her when she was only a few steps away, his eyes widening in surprise. "Hazel," he breathed, as if he couldn't believe she was really there. "Hello, Liam," she replied softly. "I didn't expect to see you here." Liam looked at the painting again. It's amazing, Hazel. You've really seen me, haven't you? You've seen everything." There was a vulnerability in his voice that caught Hazel off guard. For a moment, she glimpsed the man behind the facade of the successful businessman, a man struggling with conflicting expectations and desires. "I painted what I felt," she said simply. Liam turned to face her fully, his blue eyes intense. "Hazel, But before he could continue, a shrill voice cut through the air. "Liam, darling, there you are." Amber Huntington approached, her designer dress rustling as she walked. She wrapped her arm around Liam's, casting a cold glance at Hazel. "Oh, hello," Amber said, her tone falsely sweet. "You must be the artist. Liam was so insistent on coming to this exhibition." Hazel felt her face heat up, but kept her composure. "Yes, it's me, Hazel Mason. It's a pleasure to see you again, Miss Huntington." Liam looked uncomfortable, his eyes flicking between Hazel and Amber. "Amber, why don't you go and get a glass of champagne? I just want to have a few words with Hazel." Amber pressed her lips together in disapproval, but nodded stiffly. "Don't be long, darling. We have that dinner with Dad, remember?" As soon as Amber walked away, Liam turned to Hazel, his expression stricken. "Hazel, I'm so sorry for everything. I wanted to tell you about the engagement, but it's complicated." Hazel shook her head, a sad smile on her lips. "Liam, you don't owe me any explanations. Our lives are very different, but they don't have to be," Liam insisted, taking a step towards her. "I've been thinking a lot since that day in Soho about who I am, what I want, and Hazel, what I want is—" "Mr. Callahan," Mr. Donovan's voice interrupted the moment. "What a pleasure to have you here. I see you're interested in this particular play. Liam seemed momentarily disoriented by the interruption. Yes, I am. In fact, I'd like to buy it. Hazel felt her heart leap. Liam wanted to buy your portrait. Mr. Donovan smiled broadly. Excellent. Let's discuss the details. Miss Mason, if you'll excuse us. Hazel nodded mechanically, watching as Liam was led away. He cast one last glance at her over his shoulder, his eyes full of unspoken emotion. The rest of the evening passed in a blur for Hazel. She talked to critics, collectors and other artists, but her mind kept returning to Liam and what he was about to say before they were interrupted. When the exhibition finally came to an end, Hazel was exhausted but elated. Several of her works had been sold, and she had received invitations to future exhibitions. "Congratulations, Liv," Zoe exclaimed, hugging her tightly. "You've done great." Hazel smiled, feeling truly happy for the first time in weeks. "Thank you, Zoe, for everything." As they left the gallery, Hazel noticed an envelope wedged under the windshield wiper of her car. With trembling hands, she opened it. "Hazel, your art has shown me a truth that I've been trying to ignore. There are decisions I need to make, things I need to resolve, but I want you to know that you've changed my life in a way I never imagined possible. I hope that one day we can talk again, without interruptions. Always yours, Liam." Hazel folded the note carefully, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. Part of her wanted to run after Liam, to demand that he finish what he was about to say. But another part, the part that had grown and matured through pain and art, knew that some things needed time. "Is everything all right?" Zoe asked, noticing Hazel's thoughtful expression. Hazel smiled, tucking the note into her bag. "Yes, it is. In fact, it's better than okay." As they drove back to the Bronx, Hazel looked out of the window, watching the city lights. New York had always been a city of possibilities, of dreams fulfilled and hearts broken. Now, more than ever, she felt she was on the threshold of something new and exciting. Her art had opened doors she had never imagined possible. And as for Liam, well, that chapter wasn't completely closed yet. But for the first time, Hazel felt that whatever the future held, she was ready to face it. Not as the girl who dreamed of fairy tales, but as the woman who had learned to paint her own story. The months following Hazel's exhibition were a roller coaster of emotions and opportunities. Her name began to circulate in New York art circles, and she soon found herself navigating a world she had only dreamed of belonging to before. One sunny spring morning, Hazel was in her new studio in Brooklyn. A small but airy space she had managed to rent with the proceeds of her recent sales. Vigorous brushstrokes echoed through the room as she worked on her latest series, inspired by the stories of ordinary people in New York. The shrill ring of her phone snapped her out of her concentration. It was Zoe. "Liv, you need to see this." Zoe's voice sounded urgent and excited. "See what?" Hazel asked, wiping ink from her hands. "Turn on the TV, news channel now." Intrigued, Hazel turned on the small television in the corner of the studio. Her eyes widened as she saw a familiar image on the screen. Liam Callahan, looking serious and determined, was giving a press conference. "Which is why today I am announcing my resignation as CEO of Callahan Industries." Liam's voice sounded clear and firm. "It's time for the company to take a new direction, one that is more in line with ethical values and social responsibility." Hazel was stunned. Liam was leaving his family's company, the company he had spent his whole life preparing to lead. "Liv, are you still there?" Zoe's voice brought her back to reality. "Yes, I can't believe it," Hazel mumbled. "I know. And there's more," Zoe continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I heard that he broke off his engagement to Amber Huntington. Apparently it was quite a scandal." Hazel's heart leapt. Liam had broken up with Amber. Had he left his family's company? What did that mean? In the days that followed, Hazel found herself looking at her phone several times, half expecting a call or message from Liam. But nothing came. Part of her wanted to get in touch, to ask if he was all right, what had happened. But another part, the part that still remembered the pain of the disappointment, kept her hesitating. Meanwhile, her own career continued to flourish. A gallery in Chelsea had offered her a solo show. an opportunity that few young artists received. Hazel immersed herself in the work, channeling all her conflicting emotions into her art. It was during the preparations for this exhibition that the unexpected happened. Hazel was in the gallery, discussing the layout with the curator, when a familiar voice made her freeze. "Sorry, I'm late for the meeting. The traffic was terrible." Hazel turned slowly to see Liam entering the gallery, looking slightly out of breath and carrying a briefcase. Their gazes met, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. Liam looked different, more relaxed perhaps, but also more mature. There was a new confidence in his bearing, one that didn't come from titles or expectations, but from within. "Hazel," he said softly, a small smile forming on his lips. "I didn't know you'd be here." The curator, sensing the tension in the air, sniffed discreetly. "Ah, Mr. Callahan, how nice of you to arrive. Miss Mason, this is our new art consultant. He's been invaluable in our search for new talent." Hazel blinked in surprise. "Art consultant?" Liam shrugged a little shyly. "Yeah, well, let's just say I've decided to follow a long-neglected passion." The curator looked between the two of them, clearly sensing that there was a story there. "Well, why don't we continue our discussion in the office? I'm sure Mr. Callahan will have some great ideas for your exhibition, Miss Mason." As they followed the curator, Hazel and Liam exchanged glances full of unasked questions and unspoken words. The tension between them was palpable, a mixture of unresolved attraction and past hurts. The meeting was a surreal mix of professionalism and pent-up emotions. Liam offered insightful ideas on how best to present Hazel's work, demonstrating a knowledge of art that surprised her. Hazel, for her part, spoke passionately about her new pieces, aware the whole time of Liam's intense gaze on her. When the meeting finally ended, Hazel found herself hesitating at the gallery door. Part of her wanted to run away, to avoid the conversation she knew they needed to have. But another part, the part that still cared deeply for Liam, held her in place. "Hazel," Liam called softly, approaching her. "Can we talk? Maybe have a coffee?" She studied him for a moment, weighing up her options. Finally, with a small sigh, she nodded. "All right, I know a place nearby." They walked in silence to a small cafe on the corner, the air between them charged with tension and anticipation. After ordering and sitting down, Liam was the first to break the silence. "I wanted to call you," he began, his eyes searching hers. "So many times I picked up the phone, but I felt like I needed to get my life in order first, that I owed it to you." Hazel nodded slowly, absorbing his words. "I saw the news. About the company, about Amber." Liam ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Hazel remembered well from her days selling popcorn. It was a difficult decision, but a necessary one. "Your art, Hazel. It made me see things about myself that I'd been ignoring for years. It made me realize that I was living the life that others expected of me, not the one I really wanted." "And what do you want, Liam?" Hazel asked softly, her heart racing. He looked at her intensely, his blue eyes full of emotion. "I want a meaningful life. I want to make a difference in the art world, not just accumulate wealth. And I want a chance to make things right with you, Hazel. If you're still willing to give me that chance." Hazel felt tears forming in her eyes. There was so much sincerity in Liam's voice, so much vulnerability in his gaze, but there were still wounds from the past, doubts and fears. "Liam, she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I can't deny that I still have feelings for you, but so much has changed. We've changed, and I don't know if I can just forget everything that's happened." Liam reached across the table, gently taking her hand. "I'm not asking you to forget, Hazel. I'm asking us to start again. Slowly, one day at a time. No secrets, no expectations other than our own." Hazel looked down at their joined hands, feeling the familiar warmth of Liam's touch. There was still a long way to go, many conversations to be had, trust to be rebuilt. But as she looked into Liam's eyes, she saw something that gave her hope, the promise of a new beginning, of a more mature and true love. With a small smile, she squeezed his hand. "One day at a time," she agreed softly. As the afternoon sun bathed the cafe in golden light, Hazel and Liam began to talk about art, about dreams, about the future. And although neither of them knew exactly where this new path would take them, they both felt, deep in their hearts, that they were finally heading in the right direction. Summer arrived in New York with a relentless heatwave, but for Hazel and Liam, the days seemed full of new possibilities. In the months that followed their reunion at the gallery, they began to carefully rebuild what had been broken, navigating familiar ground but with a new perspective. On a particularly hot July afternoon, Hazel was in her studio, working on a new piece for her next exhibition. The air conditioning hummed softly, barely able to combat the heat seeping through the windows. She was so absorbed in her work that she almost didn't hear the soft knock on the door. "Come in," she shouted, without taking her eyes off the screen. "Wow, it's warm in here." Liam's familiar voice made her turn around. He was standing in the doorway, holding 2 cups of iced coffee and with a warm smile on his face. Hazel smiled back, putting her brush aside. "My knight in shining armor, bringing iced coffee. You read my mind." Liam laughed, handing her one of the cups. "I thought you could use a break, and maybe a bit of company." In recent months, these casual moments had become more and more frequent. Quick lunches between meetings, walks through Central Park at the weekend, long conversations about art and life. Slowly, they were rediscovering each other, building something stronger and truer than they had before. Hazel sipped her coffee, enjoying the freshness. "So, how was your meeting with the Arts Foundation?" Liam's face lit up. "It was amazing, Liv. They loved the idea of creating art programs for children in underprivileged neighborhoods. We're starting a pilot project in the Bronx next month." Hazel felt a surge of pride. Since leaving Callahan Industries, Liam had dedicated himself to using his wealth and influence to make a difference in the art world. It was a remarkable transformation to see the former profit-focused businessman now passionate about making art accessible to all. "That's wonderful, Liam," she said sincerely. "You're really making a difference." Liam smiled, but there was a shadow of uncertainty in his eyes. "Sometimes I still wonder if I did the right thing. You know, leaving everything behind." Hazel put her cup aside and approached him, putting a hand on his arm. "Hey, look at everything you've accomplished in the last few months. You're happier, more fulfilled. Doesn't that count for something?" Liam covered her hand with his, their eyes meeting. "It counts for everything," he said softly. "And a lot of that is thanks to you, Hazel. You showed me that there was more to life than spreadsheets and quarterly reports." The moment was interrupted by Hazel's phone ringing. It was her agent. "Hazel, I've got amazing news." Marcus' excited voice sounded from the other end of the line. "The Pearson Gallery in London has seen your work and wants to do a solo show of yours. It's an incredible opportunity, darling. They want you to go there for a few months to prepare new pieces specifically for the European market." Hazel's heart raced. A solo show in London. It was a dream come true. But then she looked at Liam, who was watching her with a mixture of curiosity and concern, and felt a tightness in her chest. "That's... wow." "Marcus, how long would I have to stay in London?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "They're suggesting 6 months, minimum, maybe longer, depending on the reception." 6 months, half a year across the ocean, away from New York, away from Liam, just when they were finally finding their way back to each other. "Can I think about it and give you an answer in a few days?" Hazel asked. After hanging up, she turned to Liam, who was staring at her with an indecipherable expression. "It was Marcus," she began hesitantly. Well, there's a gallery in London that wants to do a solo show of my work." Liam blinked, surprised, before a broad smile spread across his face. "Hazel, that's amazing. Congratulations." But Hazel couldn't quite match his enthusiasm. "They want me to go there for 6 months, maybe longer." Liam's smile faltered for a moment, but he quickly pulled himself together. "Oh, well, that's an incredible opportunity for you." Hazel nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the decision she would have to make. "Yes, it is." An uncomfortable silence fell over them. Finally, Liam spoke, his voice soft but firm. You have to go, Liv. She looked at him, surprised. What? You have to go, he repeated. It's the kind of opportunity that could change your career. You've worked hard for it. You deserve it. Hazel felt tears forming in her eyes. But what about us, Liam? We've just met again. Liam moved closer, taking her hands in his. Hey, look at me. We've just spent months rebuilding our relationship, right? Building something stronger, truer. 6 months won't change that. Are you sure? Hazel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Liam smiled, although there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. I am. Besides, London isn't that far away. There are airplanes, you know, and FaceTime. Hazel laughed through her tears, feeling a wave of love and gratitude for this man who was willing to put her dreams before his own desires. Okay, she finally said, I'll go. In the weeks that followed, Hazel found herself in a whirlwind of preparations. Between packing her things, finalizing details with the gallery in London and saying goodbye to friends and family, she barely had time to breathe. But every step of the way, Liam was there, helping her pack her art materials, offering advice on how to navigate the European art market, simply being a shoulder to cry on when the stress became too much. On the eve of her departure, they walked together through Central Park, the leaves beginning to change color, heralding the arrival of autumn. They stopped on a bridge over a small lake, the sunset painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. You know, Liam said, breaking the contemplative silence, they say that if you make a wish on this bridge at sunset, it comes true. Hazel raised an eyebrow, amused. Oh yeah. And who exactly says that? Liam shrugged, a playful smile on his lips. People, reliable sources. Laughing, Hazel closed her eyes, pretending to make a wish. When she opened them again, she found Liam looking at her with such tenderness that her heart seemed to leap. What did you wish for? He asked softly. Hazel smiled, leaning closer to him. If I tell you, it won't come true. Liam wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. Well, I know what I wished for, he murmured. Oh yeah, and what was it? He looked her in the eye, all playfulness disappearing from his expression. That no matter what happens in the next 6 months, no matter how far apart we are, we'll find our way back to each other. Hazel felt tears forming in her eyes again. That, she whispered, is a wish I intend to make come true. As the sun disappeared over the horizon, Hazel and Liam sealed their promise with a kiss, full of love, hope, and the promise of a future together, no matter what fate had in store for them. Winter in New York had always been magical, but that year in particular, the city seemed to vibrate with a special energy. Snowflakes danced in the cold December air, covering the streets and buildings in a silent white blanket. At John F. Kennedy International Airport, Liam Callahan paced back and forth, his heart pounding in his chest. 6 months had passed since he and Hazel had said goodbye on that bridge in Central Park. 6 months of FaceTime calls, affectionate text messages, and surprise packages sent across the Atlantic. 6 months of longing, growth, and anticipation. Hazel's flight had landed 20 minutes ago, and every second of waiting seemed like an eternity to Liam. He arranged the bouquet of sunflowers in his hands, Hazel's favorite flowers, and checked the arrivals gate for the 1,000th time. Finally, he saw her. Hazel emerged from the crowd of passengers, her red hair a beacon in the sea of unfamiliar faces. She looked different, somehow. More confident, perhaps. More serene. The experience in London had clearly changed her. Their eyes met across the crowded lobby, and for a moment the world around them seemed to disappear. Then, with a cry of joy, Hazel ran towards Liam, throwing herself into his arms. "You're here," she whispered, her voice tinged with emotion. "You really are here." Liam hugged her tightly, burying his face in her hair. "Always," he replied simply. When they finally separated, they both had tears in their eyes and beaming smiles on their faces. "These are for you," Liam said, handing over the bouquet of sunflowers. "Welcome back, Liv." Hazel buried her face in the flowers, inhaling deeply. "Thank you, they're perfect." As they walked out of the airport, hand in hand, Liam couldn't help noticing how Hazel seemed to glow. So, how was it? London, the exhibition, everything. Hazel's face lit up. It was incredible, Liam. The reception to my work was beyond my wildest expectations. I sold almost every piece on the opening night. I knew you'd rock it, Liam said, his chest heaving with pride. I watched the live broadcast of the opening, you looked stunning. Hazel blushed, squeezing his hand. Thank you for being so supportive, even from a distance. I don't know if I could have done it without you. As they drove back to the city, Hazel told Liam about her experiences in London, the galleries she visited, the artists she met, the inspirations she found. Liam listened intently, amazed at the passion in her voice. And you? Hazel finally asked. How have things been here? Liam smiled, a glint of excitement in his eyes. Well, remember that pilot art project in the Bronx I mentioned before you left? It took off in a way I never imagined. We're expanding to other boroughs, and we've even received a proposal to take the program to other cities. Oh, Liam, that's wonderful, Hazel exclaimed, squeezing his arm. I'm so proud of you. When they arrived at Hazel's apartment in Brooklyn, they both hesitated for a moment. 6 months was a long time, and despite the constant conversations, there was a tension in the air, an uncertainty about how to proceed. Do you want to come in? Hazel asked softly. We can order something to eat, catch up properly. Liam nodded, smiling. I'd love to. Inside the apartment, Hazel immediately went to her painting area. Liam watched her curiously as she rummaged through a pile of canvases. There's something I want to show you, she said, pulling out a covered canvas. With one fluid movement, she removed the cloth, revealing a stunning painting. Liam was breathless. It was a view of the Central Park Bridge where they had said goodbye, but painted in a way that captured not just the scene, but the emotion of the moment. The colors were vibrant, the strokes bold and expressive. And there, in the center of the painting, 2 figures embraced, their outlines blending as if they were one person. Hazel, Liam whispered, moved. It's beautiful. She smiled, a little shyly. I painted it in London, when I missed you the most. It's for you. Liam turned to her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I love you, Hazel. These 6 months have only made me even more sure of that. Hazel felt her heart soar. I love you too, Liam, she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. They moved closer slowly, as if magnetized. When their lips met, it was as if time had stopped. The kiss was soft, sweet, full of promise and possibility. When they broke apart, Liam leaned his forehead against hers. You know, he said softly, I've been thinking a lot while you were away. About us, about the future. Hazel looked him in the eye, sensing that something important was about to happen. Liam took a deep breath, as if gathering his courage. And I realize that I don't want to spend another day away from you. Hazel Mason, will you marry me? For a moment, Hazel was paralyzed with shock. Then a radiant smile lit up her face. Yes, she whispered. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Laughing and crying at the same time, they hugged again, spinning around the small space of the apartment. Later that night, as they watched the snow fall through the window, snuggled together on the sofa, Hazel reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the popcorn stand in Times Square to the gallery in London, from lies and misunderstandings to honesty and trust. It had been a long and sometimes difficult road, but every step had taken them exactly where they were meant to be. What are you thinking about? Liam asked softly, noticing her distant gaze. Hazel smiled, snuggling closer to him. I'm thinking about how funny life is, how sometimes we have to lose ourselves to find ourselves, how true love isn't a fairy tale, but something we build together, day by day. Liam kissed the top of her head. Well, I'm looking forward to building each day of our future with you. As the city fell asleep under the blanket of snow, Hazel and Liam stayed awake, planning their future, dreaming of the possibilities that stretched out before them. The journey hadn't been easy, but every challenge, every obstacle had led them to this perfect moment. And so, on a winter's night in New York, With the snow falling softly outside and the warmth of love filling the small apartment, Hazel and Liam began the next chapter of their lives. Not as a popcorn vendor and a billionaire in a modern fairy tale, but as two individuals who had grown, changed, and in the process, found each other and themselves. The future was uncertain, full of challenges and surprises. But of one thing they were certain: they would face everything together, with love, trust, and the certainty that, no matter what life had in store for them, they would always find their way back to each other. If this story touched your heart, then don't forget to leave a like. Use the super thanks located just below the video to directly support the channel and help create more amazing content. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. Now don't miss the next incredible story that's appearing on your screen. I greatly appreciate your support and hope to see you soon. Thank you for watching.